RetroBlasting is a YouTube channel for adult pop culture enthusiasts. Anyone under the age of 13 should only watch this channel with your parents. RetroBlasting is not a children's channel. How do you go on when you started with the greatest Japanese anime of the 80s to the most forgettable cartoon series ever that ended in a strange Pyrrhic victory for the people of Earth? What series could they have selected that could kick some adrenaline back into this show at this all-time low, renew interest in where it was heading, and also provide a satisfying and epic final act? What could they add into the mix to wash the bitter taste of the masters from our tongues?
How about motorcycles that turn into mecha combat armor?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah!
We gotta get back to the past, to the 20th century. Digging through the bubble wrap into your memories. Back was the collector, he's protecting what we find. Relentless heavy rhythms keep us safe through time. Retroblasting.
This is killer! Oh, no, 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 no!
The stuff you love since you were 9. We're blasting into the past to see what thrill still lasts. Retroblasting.
You might recall in part 2 of this retrospective how the characters from Macross left at the end of the original story cycle, and when the Masters showed up in the second story cycle, the original characters off-screen in the SDF-3 sent back a single token mini-fleet to help the Earth. But they were trounced, and then the protoculture flowers of life or whatever blew out of the ruins of the SDF-1 and flew all over the planet, alerting the new big bad, the Invid of the Earth's existence. Whoops. The new generation deals with the fallout from that... victory? Can we call it that? Kinda sounds like failure. So now it's 12 years later and the 21st Mars Division fleet arrives to try and take back the Earth because the Invid showed up as promised in the years after the Masters and easily took over the entire planet. Lieutenant Commander Scott Bernard, ace fighter pilot and young John Cusack of this series, proposes to his girlfriend right as they're about to go into battle with the Invid to liberate the planet. Not the greatest timing because his girlfriend Marlene serves on the bridge crew of the cruiser, and the only reason Scott survives the total rout of his comrades by the Invid is because he's a fighter pilot and manages to crash land in South America. Oh, and Marlene dies a horrible fiery death in the cruiser as it incinerates in Earth's atmosphere while hurtling towards the surface after being gutted by Invid laser fire. Scott vows revenge on the Invid for killing his fiancée, and couple that with his unwavering sense of duty as a soldier, and Scott is determined to reach the Invid stronghold in North America at a place called Reflex Point and destroy the Invid, single-handedly if he has to. Before we get into any other details, I should probably mention that, like the previous 2 story cycles, New Generation is adapted from a Japanese anime as well. This time around, it's a series called Genesis Climber Mospeada. As with the other series, Super Dimension Fortress Macross and Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross, Genesis Climber Mospeada is not related to either of these in any way. As a standalone series, the premise of Mospeada is fairly straightforward. Sometime in the year 2050, humans colonize Mars around the same time that invading aliens called In-Bit, yeah, not Invid, In-Bit, take over the Earth. The In-Bit are sensitive to the use of a 21st century hydrogen fuel called HBT, and they strictly regulate human use of it. As you've probably guessed, in the Robotech adaptation, HBT is changed to protoculture.
What seems to be the problem? Well, it appears that you've run out of protoculture.
It seems like we're always running out of protoculture, aren't we, huh?
Scott is named Stick Bernard in Mospeada and is part of the third attempt to take back the Earth in 2083. Unlike the adaptation of Southern Cross into The Masters, Mospeada's plot is adapted more or less as directly as Macross had been, with just a few minor story adjustments to tie it to the events of the previous series. I have to admit up front that, while not the fault of the adapted series, I have a real axe to grind with the last-minute switch to a new villain for the final story cycle.
As they must now await the coming of the Invid.
To me, that's one of the main failings of the Robotech saga. For the first two series, the Robotech Masters and the Zentradi share a direct, if vague, connection. We know that at some point, the Zentradi took orders from the Masters. Beyond that, it gets really convoluted in expanded material. But the animated series keeps it just vague enough while making it clear they are connected. However, at the end of the Masters story cycle, suddenly it's all about the Invid.
Once the hidden spores have been collected, even the Invid will not dare to stand against us.
It's like the Masters are waving their hands and saying, "It isn't us you should be worried about. Quick, catch, and then throw the hot potato called the Invid at the human race." Robotech cuts its own throat in making this switch, because now we have to get emotionally invested in a villain we know next to nothing about, and in what is literally the third act. It makes the introduction of General Grievous in Episode 3 seem like a mild irritation by comparison. I'm just not sure why the writers would complicate that part of the continuity. They could have told the exact same story, but kept the audience's emotional investment high by simply saying at the end of The Masters that they would stop at nothing to regain the protoculture, and would respond to this defeat with their most advanced and deadly troops. Cut to New Generation, and the Masters using this army have subjugated the Earth entirely as they warned humanity they would, and we continue with events already in progress. I just don't care about this Johnny-come-lately villain. Okay, now that that's off my chest, we can talk about the characters and the episodes. New Generation is like a weird hybrid of Airwolf and the A-Team, with a huge helping of Street Hawk thrown in for good measure. The year is 2031. Or, no, wait, it's 2042. No. It says here it's 2043. Ugh. Before you race to your keyboards to tell me I've gotten something wrong, I know the exact date. It's in the opening of the show. I get it. One date is the beginning of the Invid invasion. Another date is the first invasion to liberate the Earth. The next date is the next attempt. The next date is the next attempt. That would be like me saying, well, Star Wars starts 19 years after the Revenge of the Sith, but technically it starts about 4 years after the Revenge of the Sith with the first meeting to form the rebellion. But when you're talking about a series called The New Generation and you just want to find out when it starts, it's not easy to determine that through an online search. When you have 3 different dates on 3 different pages on 2 prominent Robotech websites, this series has its head firmly up its butt. Okay, let's just say it this way on the level this continuity deserves. Sometime in space future, warriors from Mars come back to Earth to fight big bad monsters. Their attack fails. Kerbloom! And Scott is the only survivor. Scott crash lands his mecha fighter in South America and fortunately has his ground vehicle intact, a motorcycle called a Cyclone. The hat trick of this little gem is the entire motorcycle can transform around the rider as weaponized battle armor, which is admittedly pretty cool. Scott rides north in the direction of North America for his eventual showdown with Reflex Point, or so he hopes. Soon after he gets moving, he meets a scavenger named Rand who has just liberated another Cyclone from the wreckage of a Mars Division cruiser in the desert. Rand just wants to stay far and away from the Invid.
Hey, do I look like some kind of travel agent? I don't know anything about Invid headquarters.
But despite his reluctance, he ends up becoming traveling companions with Scott, who offers to teach him how to use the Cyclone armor. Rand initially refuses Scott's tutelage.
Aw, come on, I'll show you how to convert to cyclone armor, or are you just too chicken?
Hey, pal, why would I ever want to convert into that mecha?
At first, I couldn't believe anyone living in that world would reject learning how to use such a powerful defensive weapon. But then I realized Scott is a wholly unlikable character, so maybe that's what Rand was responding to.
Look, if you could just tell me where the Invid headquarters is. Listen to me, I'm asking you a question.
Rand is this laid-back, independent survivor with a lot of real-world skills and a generally pleasant demeanor.
You know, Rand, your confidence is underwhelming.
Pretend you believe in me.
Scott is a block of wood. His personality has two settings, brooding and total jerkwad.
Come on, cut the clowning.
His original name in Mospeada was On the Nose. He's a textbook stick in the mud.
Stick in the mud.
From here, the series takes on that A-Team flavor. Scott and Rand ride from town to town, picking up new companions as they go, and before long, they've formed a ragtag group of freedom fighters. With each new encounter, they always have to deal with the angry, or unhelpful, or cowardly, or deceitful villagers. In this way, the show is very much like A-Team, or even more similarly, Combat, where the French villagers are always reticent to assist the squad against the Nazis. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I should probably tell you who the other members of the A-Team are in this show. First, there's Annie, who, much in the vein of Voltron's Pidge, is a Lilliputian-statured character whose age is somewhat tough to pin down. She's obsessed with boys and can only be described as constantly heartsick and, dare I say, horny.
Are you married by any chance?
What? Married? Why no?
You lucky boy!
Annie is easily the most obnoxious character in New Generation. In Mospeada, she's named Mint, and why the Robotech writers didn't stick with this stymies me because her name is literally written in the sky at one point in the series, and in order to explain this away, they start having Rand randomly, you see what I did there, call her Mint deliberately as his chosen nickname, as if he can't be bothered to remember her actual name, which ticks her off.
Well, little Mint, I'm afraid I cut the skis for a certain person who's a little older and taller than you. Mint, what do you say we goose this cyclone a little? How does that sound to you?
I'm not Mint!
Had they simply named her Mint from the beginning, this wouldn't have been necessary or weird. Because of all the nicknames to choose from, Mint doesn't even make sense. There's Rook Bartley, a renegade spirit with a red cyclone motorcycle all her own. She's a stands with a fist, tough as nails butt kicker that does not join Scott and Rand immediately. But she was immediately my favorite character throughout the series.
You almost killed me.
Well, come at me again and let's see if I can get it right. Okay with you?
Rook was once part of a motorcycle gang, and in Mospeada it is heavily implied that an enemy gang cornered her and the entire gang had their way with her. Shockingly, this is not downplayed in the Robotech adaptation.
Ain't nobody gonna help you. Now that scared and ran away and left you ahead of play.
And then there's Yellow Dancer? No, wait, Lancer? Yellow Lancer. Wait, his last name is Belmont? So Lancer Belmont? Oh, and he's Yellow Belmont in the original Mospeada?
Right.
Anyway, Lancer is a cross-dresser who moonlights as a female singing celebrity named Yellow Dancer. Unbeknownst at first to the rest of the group, Lancer is, like Scott, a pilot with the Robotech Expeditionary Force. But he was part of a previous attempt to take back the Earth, and after he was shot down, he decided to become a world-famous pop star and pretend to be a woman while doing it. Oddly, even when he's dressed as a woman, he makes no effort to sound like one.
Well, why don't you give these people a sample of what you consider music?
He sings like a dude. In the original Mospeada, he sounds like a woman when singing to complete the illusion. I'm not sure why Harmony Gold opted for male vocals.
How could you do this to me?
We also have Jim Austin, nicknamed Lunk. Not Hunk, Lunk. Lunk was a soldier, but he lost the will to fight and apparently got a friend of his killed in the process, so now he's a deserter. He drives a vehicle that kind of looks like a Humvee. He's also an expert military mechanic, and despite his avoidance of returning to service, his favorite hobby has been scavenging parts to secretly restore a working Alpha fighter.
I'm a certified biomaintenance engineer. I used to be.
Which he gladly hands over to Scott to continue their fight with the Invid. The only problem is that every time they use the Alpha, or the Cyclones, or Lunk's truck, they're burning protoculture, which alerts the Invid to their presence.
We've been giving ourselves away every time we switch on our Cyclones or our laser blasters.
So it becomes a kind of Airwolf thing, where they hide the Alpha fighter just outside the next town and drive in to see what the local problem is, and inevitably the Invid show up, so Scott races back to the Alpha fighter and Airwolfs the crap out of the Invid. The first third of the series follows this format fairly consistently. The heroes find a town, and there's a problem of the week. In one instance, the same evil motorcycle gang that messed up Rook's life is causing problems in town, and the heroes have to deal with the gang once and for all. In another, it's a town of people who trick military personnel passing through to go over to an island infested by Invid where they're killed. In return, the Invid don't bother the townspeople. The problem of the week format comprises the first third of New Generation. Scott runs into a military hero that he thinks will lead the rebellion against the Invid, but the guy turns out to be a traitor selling everyone out to the Invid.
So the hero's a traitor. No wonder the town's full of laughing soldiers.
A lot of people are selling out strangers to the Invid. You'd think after the first 20 times, Scott and the crew would get smarter. They don't. Will Lunk find his scientist friend to give him back an old book? Nope, the villagers beat the guy to death years ago and are ashamed of their crime.
May God help you indeed, mister, but me, I've got places to go.
Sounds like combat.
The father was working for us. Working for us? He was playing cozy with the crowd so he could gather information. Lieutenant, we were right here in this village when that man was killed in the street.
In yet another town, a corrupt opportunist named Donald sells fake maps across the mountains that show a safe way through to an alleged safe city while avoiding the Invid.
Here's your map showing the secret passage through the mountains. You'll be safe with this.
In truth, there is no safe city, and anyone who buys a map from this guy is falling victim to his con, becoming prey for the Invid in the mountains. Donald is in love with a woman from Lancer's past, and Lancer knows he's garbage and almost convinces her to run away with him so they can be together again. But in the end, she returns to Donald.
Oh, Lancer. This time it looks like I'm the one who's getting off.
That's a shocking revelation from his former flame that this rock star doesn't have the skills, especially considering the name of his motorcycle in the original Mospeada is the Blowsperier. Around this point in the series, things start to get weird and stupid. First, there's the episode The Genesis Pits, where the team find themselves in a primordial world of dinosaurs.
They're playing with the history of life on Earth. The evolution of biology from ancient times to today.
The Invid are trying to discover the best form to take on to survive on this planet. Then Rand discovers Ariel, naked and afraid, in the ruins of a village the Invid have destroyed. Scott decides to call her Marlene after his dead betrothed, because that's not creepy at all. As is their modus operandi, they bring her along on their way to Reflex Point, continuing to hide, dodge, and fight the Invid. This middle act of the series is really where I lost interest in the story. You've got Rand wandering off into a sandstorm only to have a protracted dream about being a fantasy knight and saving Ariel from dragons and crap. Annie tries to marry the prince of a jungle tribe. They conveniently find 2 more intact fighters in the ruins of a Robotech ship so Rook and Lancer can stop riding motorcycles. And it's really fortunate that both Rook and Lancer can just jump in advanced fighter jets and fly them with no problem. Yeah, I know Lancer is allegedly a fighter pilot, but Rook is not. But I guess if you know how to ride a motorcycle, you'll have no problem in an Alpha fighter. Lunk has an acute PTSD moment and almost breaks up the team, but then they don't.
Whew, close call. I'm so relieved.
Finally, they make it to the north coast of South America and head across the Caribbean in abandoned ships. Meanwhile, the Invid continue to attempt evolution stages, and they create this green-haired woman who catches Lancer bathing in a lagoon. And, well, Lancer, Wow, that water's really low. I feel like there should be something there that isn't.
Is this true? Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Okay, moving on. Lancer has just discovered Sarah, one of the pair of evolved Invid commanders, the other being Korg.
All right, pal, you're not going anywhere until I get some answers. Wait a minute. You're a woman.
Wait a minute. Are the writers really trying to convince us that out of all the characters in this group, Lancer is the one who can't immediately identify someone's gender? Seriously? Him? When watching New Generation, it was at this point that the series' plot started to pick up again. Barring a few minor plot details, you could practically jump from the discovery of Ariel to the arrival of Sarah and Korg without missing anything substantial. The middle episodes are really filler, as is most of the final third of the series. The filler overstays its welcome a bit with episodes about deserted cities hidden underground, Rook falling in love with a half-android cowboy named Dusty who's working for the Invid to kill a specific number of Robotech soldiers, or how about their trip to New York City to get more protoculture fuel and watch some 80s dancers, or the boilerplate story about aging soldiers who still have one last good mission in them. I think I've seen this plot 10 times in various TV shows. And in the background, Sarah struggles to understand why she cannot bring herself to destroy Ariel, Lancer, and the other teammates. If you haven't guessed by now, it's because Ariel was the Invid's first attempt to evolve one of their own into a human form.
I don't believe what I'm hearing. I'm not an Invid. You were placed among the people of Earth to learn their plans and report back.
Scott and the others discover this at the last minute, and even Ariel herself is largely caught by surprise, since she was created with almost no memories of her own. Scott's character is all over the map on this one. Initially, upon the reveal that she was Invid, he was open, understanding, and dare I say, progressive.
That woman proves that what a person is made of doesn't determine their spirit or the love they possess.
But a few episodes later, he outright rejects her love because she's Invid.
Marlene, I'm capable of only one thing, and that's fighting against the Invid. Goodbye.
You don't secure me at all.
Jane, I want to talk to you later.
Goodbye.
As they fight their way into Reflex Point for the ultimate showdown with the Invid leader, the Regis, Ariel and Sarah appeal to the Regis for peace and mercy toward the humans before the returning Robotech Expeditionary Force starts the war with the Invid all over again and potentially destroys the Earth again in the process with Neutron S missiles. All of this is interrupted by Korg, who fills the role of angry psychopath at this point. Scott and Korg have an aerial duel. Korg is destroyed. With new Shadow Fighters, the Robotech fleet cannot be detected by the Invid until it's too late. The Regis decides the humans are still too primitive and combative to live amongst, which is totally hypocritical given the Invid subjugated them to get the protoculture in the first place, and had plans to exterminate them.
This pathetic species you've become so fond of cannot be allowed to stand in the way of our future.
Regardless of that logic problem, the Regis opts to use all of the protoculture on Earth at once to essentially level up the Invid race into pure energy beings and then leave the planet for another world. Scott decides to go back to Mars rather than stay on Earth with Ariel. Rand and Rook hook up, and Sarah stays on Earth to be with Lancer, who's decided that now he's going to sing as a man for the rest of his career. I'm not going to exaggerate and say New Generation is slipshod like the Masters. It's not. The series is more grounded than the Masters due to the source material, and the characters are certainly more varied and memorable.
New Generation is far superior to the Masters in terms of design and writing. But that's just it. The series is competent. But competent doesn't equal compelling.
Macross is a stellar series that keeps your attention from the first episode to the last. Genesis Climber Mospeada is more forgettable. The first handful of episodes are a fun breath of fresh air after the slog of Southern Cross or the Masters, take your pick. However, Mospeada is a more paint-by-numbers TV show, and when you put the Robotech adaptation over it, making the villains yet another entry in the revolving door of big baddies to attack Earth, New Generation feels repetitive and derivative at the same time. More fleets threatening the Earth, more aliens killing humans, more jet fighters that transform into mecha robots, more green-haired alien women that become sympathetic to humans and result in the downfall of their own civilization. Collect them all, trade with friends. More pretentious alien races that declare their superiority to humans while having spent an entire series doing the very things for which they claim to hate humans. I'm sure by now a number of you are hating me because you probably love New Generation and you're turning your ears off, so let me be as clear as I can be. I don't hate this show. I like the more direct and contained story in Mospeada. I like the Cyclone Armor motorcycles a lot. I like Rook, and yeah, I guess I like Rand also. I mean, I definitely like Rook, so there's that, right?
New Generation doesn't offend. It just doesn't wow like Macross.
And with that, we've reached the end of Robotech's original story arc, the final part of this televised, unofficial trilogy adapted from 3 unrelated Japanese animated series. Given that each series has both a Japanese original series and the corresponding Robotech dub, I'm not exaggerating when I say this has been the most challenging series of classic cartoon reviews I've ever tackled. Subscribers have asked if I will ever review Robotech 2 The Sentinels, or Shadow Chronicles, or Macross Do You Remember Love? To that I say, cool your jets and be patient. I hope to live long enough to review a number of those spin-offs, but right now the final chapter of this retrospective awaits me, and the animated series is a cakewalk compared to what lies ahead.
There's nothing more complicated when talking about Robotech than the toys.